Welcome back, everyone. Okay, let's dive into this explainer on Surah Al-Ikhlas, or Surah 112 of the Quran. We're looking at something incredibly rare and honestly just profoundly foundational today. In so many religious texts, you get descriptions of the divine through the eyes of prophets or followers, right? But here, this is Allah directly explaining His own attributes. It is a definitive, first-hand profile. So if you've ever wanted a concise, totally structured breakdown of the core Islamic concept of God, well, this is it. Today, we're going to deconstruct these verses step by step, understand exactly what they mean, especially if you're studying this for something like the Cambridge O-Level Islamiyat syllabus, and then we're going to see how all of this actually translates into the everyday mindset of a believer.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll see how Allah explains His attributes. Then we'll cover the concepts of the one and only, followed by eternal, absolute, and timeless, and no progeny, no equals. Finally, we'll pivot to the practical meaning for believers and wrap up with protection through true faith. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Allah explains His attributes. The sheer beauty of this surah is just how direct it is. There is zero ambiguity here. It's a very deliberate, perfectly structured explanation of Tawheed, which is the absolute oneness of God. The surah opens with Qul huwa Allahu ahad, meaning, say He is Allah, the One. But let's pause on that specific word for a second, ahad. It doesn't just mean one in a basic numerical sense, like one apple or one car. It translates to the one and only. It represents a unique, singular God with absolutely no one and nothing like Him. He's entirely solitary in His status. Think about it. In our physical world, we can almost always find a comparison, a duplicate, or some kind of parallel for things. The concept of ahad fundamentally, completely rejects that for Allah. He is the only God, entirely unmatched in every conceivable way.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. Eternal, absolute, and timeless.
Building on that incredible singularity, let's look at how this goes from being unique in number to being completely unbound by the physical laws we're so used to. The second verse gives us Allahu as-Samad. Now, if you're looking at the Cambridge syllabus meaning for this, they define it as eternal and absolute. And honestly, this is a massive concept to wrap your head around. It literally means He is entirely beyond time restrictions. Just think about that for a second. Time governs literally everything in our universe, doesn't it? We're born, we age, things eventually decay. Time is a creation, but as-Samad means He exists completely outside of that creation. He has always existed and will always exist. And that word absolute, it means He holds complete, unending control over all things. He relies on absolutely nothing, yet everything in existence relies entirely on Him.
Moving right along to Section 3, no progeny, no equals.
We're now stepping into the final two verses of the surah, where the text actually shifts from declaring what Allah is to explicitly rejecting what He is not. And what He is not is anything bound by human constraints. And this brilliantly illustrates the vast, unimaginable gap between our reality and the divine reality. On one hand, human nature is fundamentally dependent, right? We're bound by time, we literally require parents to exist, we often need family for support, and we constantly share authority or power in our societies. Now contrast that with Allah's nature. The third verse says, Lam yalid wa lam yolid, which translates to, He neither begets nor is born. He has no family, no parents, no children. He simply doesn't need them. He doesn't share His authority with anyone. This verse actively strips away any human characteristics that people historically tried to project onto the divine. He is completely inherently independent.
Which brings us to the closing verse of the surah. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. This brings the entire message full circle. It simply means there is no one who can even be compared to Him. You can't put anyone on His level. You literally can't even put anything on a scale next to Him. It's the ultimate declaration that His status is so supremely elevated that drawing any parallel between Him and a creation is just fundamentally impossible.
Section 4. Practical meaning for believers.
So we've walked through the literal translation and the theological definitions, right? But let's pivot from the pure theology of Tawheed for a minute and look at the real-world, everyday application of these four verses. I really want you to think about this question. If God is completely unique, outside of time, completely independent, and utterly without equal, what does that actually mean for our relationship with Him? Like, what does that mean for a believer waking up and just going about their day? How does knowing this genuinely change your behavior?
Now, what's really interesting about this is how this ancient text warns against very, very modern pitfalls. When the surah says God has no equals, it's warning against shirk, which is the act of associating partners with God. But today, Shirk isn't always about bowing down to stone statues. It is so much more subtle than that. It's about elevating everyday things to a divine, unquestionable status. It's when we start believing that wealth and money are the ultimate providers in our life, instead of God. It's when we chase fame, status, and worldly respect as if they dictate our absolute worth. The source material even specifically mentions avoiding the trap of chamakari babas, miracle-working gurus or individuals who people mistakenly believe have some sort of supernatural divine powers. Elevating a human being, money, or status to a level where you fear or revere it like God is exactly the kind of trap this surah is telling you to avoid.
The absolute key takeaway here is authority. Only Allah grants answers to prayers. Believing that anyone else, whether that's a wealthy benefactor, a famous influencer, or a so-called miracle worker, shares his authority is considered an extreme injustice. It is an absolute injustice to the truth of his ahad and asamad nature. True authority, the actual power to change your circumstances, rests solely with him. Absolutely no one else has even a fraction of that power.
Section 5. Protection through true faith.
So we know what God is, and we know what we shouldn't do, meaning we shouldn't elevate anything to his level. But what is the active, tangible benefit for a believer who deeply internalizes all of this? Well, Surah Al-Ikhlas isn't just something to be read as a historical document or a theological checklist. In practice, it is recited for deep spiritual protection. Why? Because reciting it acts as a kind of psychological and spiritual reset button. It actively reminds us that we serve the one true Lord. But really focus on this. This is the core of it. It affirms that absolutely no one can harm you and no one can help you without his explicit permission. Think about how completely liberating that is. It effectively neutralizes all those worldly threats and anxieties you carry around, because it places the ultimate control strictly back into the hands of the divine.
So the crucial point is this final thought I want to leave you with. If no one can harm or help you without his permission, who are you truly fearing today? Why let worldly anxieties dominate your mind when the supreme, absolute authority is already in control? It is an incredibly powerful, lingering reflection that can completely shift how you navigate your daily life. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this breakdown helped bring these profound concepts into clear focus for you. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you on the next one.